I'm Anagha. I am a third year student at BIT Goa in India, and I study chemistry. And beyond that, I am the founder of Yours Mindfully, which is a youth-led organization that's on a mission to make mental health resources accessible to 1 million young people by 2030. And super excited to be on this live, and super grateful to check for the opportunity as well. Yeah, let's get started with your intro as well, Amitesh.
Hi everyone, I'm Amitesh Paul, um, and I'm a student at NYU Abu Dhabi. I'm studying biology now, and I'm planning to go ahead into research in biochemistry or biomedical studies. Uh, and Throughout my life, actually, I've worked towards protecting our environment and encouraging sustainability, both among students and among community members. I've helped set up recycling bins in offices, factories, and labor camps across the UAE and conducted various awareness campaigns among the workers so that they can further spread that awareness to their own communities as well. And so it's really important to engage both students and other community members as well, especially in a country like the UAE where there's such a big expat population.
And interestingly enough, Amitesh and I have met before, like even before we got into the award, but we didn't really know each other until we both of us saw this on the shortlist and like got connected. So yeah, I mean, really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, while Mariam is still trying to join us, we'll probably maybe I'll give a short intro on how we actually came about doing this live conversation today. So I after having is there a background disturb is there a noise disturbance from my end?
Oh no, there's no such.
Okay,
You can
cool. I
continue.
mean, I can hear some echoes, so I just okay, cool. Yeah, so I was saying that after I got shortlisted into the top 50 of the Global Student Prize, I sort of like received this message from another young girl who said that I've that she'll probably never get here, and that I've been really lucky with all of this. And I sort of wrote about that experience on LinkedIn and got into sharing a lot of personal stories, like beyond achievements and all of that, things that I probably would never talk about. And Mariam got to read that, and then we had a conversation, and she said that we should probably go out and get other finalists as well, and get together and speak about things that are usually going behind the scenes. Uh, Things like I mean the things that no one really talks about when we talk about achievements. So that's pretty much how this live really came to be. So this is meant to be like a really honest conversation about how stuff happens and all. Yeah, maybe if Amitesh, if you want to share some instances or spaces where you've felt like an imposter or felt like you didn't belong on your journey. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is that imposter syndrome is something that most of us, if not all of us, have or will face at some point in our lives. Especially because when you see other achievers around you, it might often feel like your the achievements you have got so far, or any of the work you've done so far, pales in comparison to everyone else. Uh, I would definitely say I felt this when I came into university, when suddenly I was thrust into this space of global citizens from all across the globe, and everyone has such fantastic achievements. Everyone is academically brilliant and is into multiple sports, has done many activities, so definitely there. And even I would say, even in while selected on the shortlist for the Czech.org Global Student Prize as well, there are just so many fantastic global change makers, and it often, you often have to remind yourself that you are equally worthy, that that you're being recognized for the efforts you're doing today. And it's very important to recognize that, because it's very easy to go into the spiral of, oh, I do not deserve to be here, I've just gotten here through luck. So you have to recognize that it's your actions which led you to who you are today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think like pretty like a very similar reaction when I saw my name on the shortlist. Uh, got to checking it multiple times to make sure that I was in. And even with the experience with university, right? So got into bits through an entrance exam, pretty competitive one. But I mean, even after and the fact that so I grew up in UAE and gave my entrance exams after having studied in the UAE, while everyone else who came into university had been, like into serious coaching, like in India and that kind of stuff. So and there's this thing about growing up in a different country and then going to university I mean I am from India, but like not having grown up there is definitely like it means that there's some sort of cultural gap, right? So that's and that sort of kept that's definitely somewhere that I've felt that I don't. I mean, maybe not. I wouldn't say not belong, but like it constantly had this feeling that I probably got into luck, like exactly what you spoke about. And maybe for me at least, like overcoming that has been through reaching out to communities that are with like-minded people or people who have or like having honest conversations with people about what they feel. And when you have these conversations, you kind of slowly realize that everyone at some point is also feeling that. So that's sort of where, like, for me at least, trying to cope with that has come from. Also, I can see that like a couple of other finalists are also joining the live call. If you guys are interested, do like feel free to hop on and like share your stories as well. Uh, yeah. So, Amitesh, what is that thing look like for you? I mean, what is like coping with imposter syndrome or trying to get over that look like for you?
So yeah, as you mentioned, speaking to other people, like-minded people, definitely helps a lot. When you realize you have so much in common, this of course there's a lot of differences between you and other people, but then at the same time there are a lot of similarities as well, and it's up to you to like find out these. And I would say like just meeting people, you realize that you all are in a more similar situation than you believed. And the second thing is that even if someone has done something very different from you, if they have very different accomplishments, there's obviously a lot you can learn from them as well. So like if you just keep an open mind and think that I can learn from this experience without belittling myself, then yes, definitely it helps a lot.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I can see like people saying that on chat as well. So yeah, pretty, pretty. And also like maybe when we say it, it probably sounds very easy, but like it's actually not. And I think like both of us are also still trying to get through this as well, like as we speak. Uh, yeah. And yeah, so probably moving ahead and maybe talking about like a bunch of challenges that you face getting here. When I say here, like not just the Global Student Prize, but on your journey, what do you think are some of those challenges which probably people overlook when they talk about your achievements and all of that?
Hmm. Yeah, obviously a major challenge was in starting off the campaigns itself. Like, generally, even though it has gotten a lot better in the last around 5 to 6 years, there's comparatively little awareness on recycling as such here in the UAE. More, and even though the government does try a lot to spread awareness in the corporate sector or among people themselves, there's not that much. And so just trying to engage with companies and convincing them of the benefits, not just the environmental benefits, but the economic benefits as well to recycling and having these sustainable waste management systems in place. It was a lot, definitely. And even then, basically just engaging with everyone, trying to make sure that I reach across, that my message gets across to people. Often when working with blue collar workers, was kind of this language barrier because I'm not that fluent of a speaker of Hindi. So, uh, and more, and so yeah, it just took a lot of effort to like try to get across, which was one of the reasons why I also like specifically asked companies to set up color coded recycling bins, because colors are almost universal. There's no such language to colors. If you let a person recognize which color stands for which bin, then it's very easy to move on forward from that.
Yeah, definitely like starting is always very hard, especially when it comes to like big challenges. So how did you really come about sort of where did you get started? Like, what was that starting point? I mean, to reach out to like maybe a big company, that's probably like an entryway, right? So where did that sort of start for you?
Yeah. Originally I'd started at my father's workplace itself, and I'd basically tried to like my father did have some contacts within his company, so I tried to make my use of those. And I tried emailing them. I sat on a few meetings with them as well, and basically convincing them. And they had redirected me to another company who was already working towards corporate social responsibility here in the UAE. And then again, a few more meetings with that company, and decided to listen to my suggestions.
Yeah, really cool. Like, leveraging networks definitely is an important way to like get ahead, I guess. Yeah, maybe I can like also talk about like
Mhm.
similar experiences. In the sense that like I got started with like working in mental health in 2019. So I was in high school, and it sort of was so at that point, at least in my school or my community, we didn't have this whole culture of having of setting up your own organization or of actually like there was of course this culture of volunteering which is a part of like the culture in UAE as a whole, but like beyond like volunteering with like organizations, maybe like one day for I don't know, Down Syndrome Day or like Earth Day, like so beyond that I don't think there was that culture of actually solving problems in your community and things like that. So when I sort of got started, people were like really confused about why I was doing what I was doing. Also because non-profit work doesn't pay, right? So it's always like, oh, you're not going to make money out of this. Why do this? Uh, and I think the personal motivation really comes from my uncle suffering from schizophrenia and me growing up seeing him struggle, and that's sort of where the crux of all that I do come from. But like it got me like it took me a while to really process and understand that I have to do something about this. Although like this was a pretty pertinent theme in my life growing up. So and so initially when I wanted to do this work, so it was just like 10 of us on a WhatsApp group trying to make an e-magazine, and that was definitely challenging. Like one, because obviously WhatsApp is not the best place to like do teamwork. But like also because people were in different time zones. So when I started, like I was a part of this Thousand Girls, Thousand Futures mentorship program. So the people who were on my team when we started out were people from different countries. So we had this time difference as well. And back then I still remember that things like Zoom did not work in the UAE. I think Amitesh can like relate as well. Like I think it was post COVID that like Zoom and Google Meet and things like that started working in the UAE. So yeah, that's and so those kind of conversations never happened, and everything happened on WhatsApp, and everything took so much time to get done. And like when you're new in the mental health space, like also because it's a sensitive thing, you're kind of reluctant to like tell people that this is what you're doing. Like I remember having like sat up late working on an e-magazine, but like I didn't have the courage to even say that out to my friends because I wasn't sure of what I was really doing. Like I wasn't sure if what I was doing was actually worth it. And then there's this whole thing about reaching out to psychologists, and you feel like you're not big enough to reach out to these people. and they'll probably not reply to your emails. I think that fear of like getting no response is literally the one thing that stops a lot of people from reaching out. At least it stopped me in the beginning. And then somehow I, emailed this one person and, they decided to respond. I'm very grateful for that as well. But like getting like one positive response kind of, gets you going. Yeah, I think like how Amitesh also spoke about how, you were like you reached out to your dad's company and they were kind of happy to have you on board, and that sort of got you going. So I mean, this is something similar, I think, like in terms of
Yeah.
getting people on board. And initially, like it and then again, like I there's no one in in my immediate community who is into stuff like this. So you can't, like, I didn't have like a direct mentor like growing up, at least in the space. So then it becomes like a responsibility to sort of go online, find people who can help you, and reach out to them and sort of figure things out. And I think that, like, that's definitely one of the biggest challenges that I face, like at least doing the work that I do. And even beyond that, this whole thing about, if I'm going to talk about the work that I do beyond school, are people going to accept me? Am I going to fit in because no one else does stuff like this? Like, even when you're doing good stuff, like, at least I have felt that way a lot of times. Uh, I don't know if Amitesh has felt that way as well. Like, at least, when you go for like stuff like sustainability and then your friends are like hanging out and watching movies, you're probably kind of reluctant to talk to them about like the important work that you do somehow. Uh, I mean, yeah, that's very much. Well, also, like, feel free to interrupt me. I just tend to
Oh.
keep talking and talking. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what I was going to say is that, especially with your work with mental health, there's just even now, even in 2022 after COVID, where there's been like a lot of awareness on mental health in general, there's still so much stigma which holds back. So, uh, yeah, there's always, I understand there's always this like perpetual fear of like acceptance in the community, especially in Asian countries where topics like mental health are generally taboo. For me, generally, I would say I did not face similar like challenges with acceptance because now, especially in schools and universities, there's a big focus on environmental sustainability. This definitely increased after the UNEP's 2020 report, the very famous one where they predicted Earth's dome in few hundred years. So um, yeah, I would say that just having a general awareness on the environment definitely helped. And uh, yeah, but even then, it's kind of difficult convincing people to change their habits to like. I would say that even with myself, I sometimes tend to slip back on my habits. Sometimes I accidentally forget to segregate my waste. But yeah, generally, I would say if you try your best, if you convince enough people about it, it definitely helps.
Yeah, I think that's also like really important, right? Like there are sometimes when like we ourselves don't tend to, follow the stuff that but we're sort of trying to create awareness about, and then you feel there's a sense of guilt that comes
Yeah.
in terms of, I'm doing like you feel like you're being a hypocrite and not, following stuff that you're telling people. And like yeah, I was also wondering how you sort of cope with that, in the sense that like there's always news about like global warming coming in, and like all sorts of sensational news that comes in, which sort of scary and makes you feel like doomsday is coming, kind of thing. Like even when that exists, how do you keep doing the work that you do? Like I'm really curious about that.
So it is true that we have like reached this point where like the climate change that we are currently going through is kind of irreversible. But still, one thing which keeps me going is that humanity has shown to like do the impossible, actually do the impossible sometimes if enough action is put into place. Like, um for example, with the ozone hole over Antarctica, it's not gone completely now, but post Montreal Protocol, it's greatly reduced. Like much more than the point where scientists would have predicted it reducing. Of course, there are challenges now with the ozone hole reopening in some other place and across the northern and southern hemisphere again. But and there's always the in general global warming and climate change which is occurring, and natural disasters, even pandemics, which potential pandemics which are caused due to environmental challenges. But the one thing is that it's just this general belief in humanity which keeps me going, that maybe if we try hard enough we can do it.
Yeah. I mean, definitely, like it's always a sense of hope that keeps people like us going in terms of the work that we do, specifically because we're addressing like such big challenges, and I mean things that are probably not going to be solved in our lifetime completely. So I've been working with this organization called Force of Nature, and sort of training as a climate consultant to help handle something called eco anxiety. So I think you would be aware that eco anxiety is the kind of
Yeah.
the sense of like how the fear of climate change or the impacts of climate change affects your mental health. That's like it's somewhere where these issues sort of are become correlated. I mean, obviously everything is pretty much correlated only, but like this is one of the spaces where like addressing these challenges together becomes important. So I've been training as a consultant, and that's and this is definitely something that that Force of Nature as well emphasizes a lot in terms of trying and like picturing a hope, giving yourself a sense of hope, and looking back at the things that like you as a person or like humanity as a whole has done in terms of addressing bigger challenges, or like challenges as big as these, so that you and see the impact that they have made, or like even in your personal journeys, look at like times you've faced challenges and how you've overcome that and things like that. So yeah, I mean, definitely visualizing a better future is a way of getting there, right? I mean, that's definitely something that helps me as well. Uh, so yeah, and definitely like these in terms of, at least in terms of like climate change as well, like it's not just about the environment itself, right? It's like also about the most vulnerable people
Hmm.
in these environments, and like and when natural disasters strike, these are the people who are the worst affected. Things on those lines. So yeah, this is definitely something that's a very collective thing and a very correlated thing. Yeah, I'm so happy we sort of, got here at least, because we've been speaking about like mental health and sustainability, and somehow there's this middle ground where like
Yeah.
both things become equally important. Uh, yeah, so, yeah, so what do you think is, I mean, I think at least all of the young people that I have met and the people I've met on a regular basis, like, are people who genuinely want to make a difference to the world. But I think there's this feeling of sort of powerlessness, or what can I do kind of thing, that sort of stops a lot of people from going ahead and actually doing something about issues that they care about. So what do you think is the way to sort of get started, or like get going? At least when you feel you're not powerful enough, like I mean, where do you think we can sort of encourage other young people to get started?
So yeah, like this whole problem is like the banality of big evil, like these huge problems which no individual alone could probably solve. But definitely, if each of us makes like a conscious effort to like modify behaviors, there's definitely a big change we can affect. And especially because a lot of the times an argument given against like individual focus on sustainability is that the biggest polluters are usually corporations and governments, and there's nothing as such that one individual's actions can do. But I kind of disagree with that, because a lot the behavior of governments and corporations is based on the individual. If we do not support a certain corporation, obviously it will modify its behaviors because it would not want to go into loss. And This just kind of like social actions and social awareness and trying to affect uh, change. Definitely, like it's kind of in stages. Like you have the individual action first, then individual. Once you reach like this community level of awareness, you can go ahead with. People can go ahead with lobbying governments, lobbying their policymakers, and from that, policymakers regulate industries, and it's kind of like a cyclic balance of power, I would say. Um, where again, industries which are regulated sometimes industries of their own accord. I mean, by own accord, I mean mostly because of their certain consultants and such. They might release products which are better for the environment, and that encourages more uh, consumers to switch to those products. So it's kind of like the cyclic balance of power. Um, and for a like different off-topic question, I was just curious about how you dealt with uh, there are several mental health crises which came out because of the COVID-19 pandemic across the past over the past 2 years, and even like I know people personally who have broken down and had anxiety and depression due to the situation with this pandemic. So, did you face any cases like this, and how did you deal with them?
Yeah, definitely a very important question. Also, I think Mariam is here. If she's requesting to join, can you just let her in as well? Uh,
Yeah, I
yeah.
just
Hi, Mariam. Finally.
Hi, how are you? I'm so sorry for being late. There has been a lot going on outside. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah,
yeah.
we can hear you clearly. Yeah, I mean, we're so glad that you're here. Maybe you can, quickly introduce yourself to everyone who's watching.
Okay, okay. Hi, my name is Maram. I'm a fifth year medical student from Sudan, and I run a medical page. I also am advocating for education and that everyone has a right to receive good education no matter where they come from. That's the main issue I'm trying to tackle here.
Hey, really cool stuff. I mean, so what is your journey been like? So I think Amitesh and I were sort of talking about some of the challenges we faced along the way and the times where we, sort of experienced imposter syndrome and things on those lines. So maybe you could share your experiences with, facing imposter syndrome and how you overcame them.
Okay, I would say definitely the biggest challenge is your own self. We always tend to limit ourselves when it comes to how far we think we can reach or how far we think we can go. And I think it's even ingrained in our culture that if you are being or you're believing in yourself too much, it might seem like you're arrogant or such. So we tend to like limit ourselves so much. And that has been my biggest issue. Like in the past 5 or 6 years, every single time I had an opportunity, I would hesitate before applying to it. Even the Global Student Prize, I did not think at all that I would be getting to this place right now. So yeah, I definitely think that this is one of our biggest issues, and that I have recently learned to accept my accomplishments and to acknowledge them and to be able to say that I have done this and this and this. And I am so glad about like the change this experience has done to me or how much it has changed me.
I mean, yeah, definitely. Like when you talk about your achievements or like you want to talk about them, you feel like you're probably being a show off, or you're being sort of trying to glorify yourself, and that fear is just constantly there. And then you try to like when you're talking to people, you just keep aside all your accomplishments and you just try to pretend to be like everyone else just so that you can just be there.
Yeah, it's a very difficult situation, especially for the younger community.
So we have a question over here. I'll just pop it onto the screen. So the question is, who is your idol or inspiration? Yeah, either one
Uh,
of you can go ahead.
yeah, go ahead, madam.
Okay, I would personally say that my number one idol is from my own family. My mother and my uncle, they are both the most supportive people out there. They have shown me that it is okay to start dreaming big at any point in your life, no matter what. My mother has recently found her passion for designing, and even though she discovered it at the age of 40, she was still she persevered very hard to get to where she is right now and to not just think she's too old for it. So she has inspired me a lot in so many different ways, and she is my idol. If I were to think of another person who would be my idol, someone who's well known or such, I would say Mary Curie, mostly because she's another woman in science, in the science field, and her story has always been so inspirational for me personally.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think as when I stepped into university, I was really very surprised by the kind of gender ratio that was there. In the sense that in the university that I study now, the gender ratio is 1:9. So there's like nine male students for every female student, and it's kind of very alarming, at least when it and also because I grew up in a family with like I mean it's my mom, dad, me, sister, so like it's more of women at home, and I studied in a girls' school, so that's sort of got me very accustomed to having like a lot of women around. And when I step into university, I'm just surprised by the kind of gender ratio. So I just want to bring that out because you spoke about women in STEM, and I think it's really important. Again, to answer this question, I don't think I have like one specific idol or inspiration, but I think inspiration comes from like all sides, at least for me. Definitely, my mom and dad are pretty important people in my life. Like they've overcome their own personal struggles to be here, and like I'm really grateful for everything that they've done, and I've also learned a lot from them. My team at Yours Mindfully is super inspirational. I mean, they're literally people who keep me going, and sort of gives me the motivation to wake up every day. And there are these incredible people in my university, people who are pursuing their passion, doing stuff that they love. Uh, uh, and like definitely a lot of writers as well. Paul Kalanity, who wrote When Death Becomes Air, Michelle Obama, who wrote Becoming, and all of the other work that she does as well. A lot of people actually, and I think like inspiration, at least for me, comes from a lot of places. Yeah, maybe Amitesh.
Yeah, as both of you mentioned, like my number one inspiration would be my mom and my dad because they've both overcome so much of their own personal struggles to be first of all be here in the UAE itself, and then provide me such a good education across throughout my life so far. And I'm very grateful to them, and they've always been my backbone of support. Like for all of the awards I applied for and everything, they've always been the one to encourage me, to cheer me on the most. Like it's not just the awards, like every small accomplishment, whether it's maybe like a weekly quiz, or whether it's something as prestigious as the Global Student Prize. They've always been my number one cheerleaders, and I definitely very grateful to them. I'm very grateful to my sisters as well, both of whom are, I think, actually on this live as well. But and especially because they've provided me so much support and so much love, and yeah, and they both have definitely inspired me a lot throughout my life. And if it comes to a more well-known person, being a biology student, I have to mention Rachel Carson. Her book Silent Spring made a pretty significant contribution to banning DDT across the United States and then later throughout most of the world. Uh, as some of you might know, DDT has this tendency to accumulate in the body of organisms, and generally by the time it reached to the top of the food chain and in birds of prey, it kind of interfered with the process of making eggshells. So any eggs laid would be very soft, and thus uh, the young of birds of prey would die off, and this was leading to a great decline in the number of ospreys, eagles, and other such great raptors. And yeah, this problem has almost reversed in developed nations, especially where the use of DDT has been stopped.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Also, like, learn something new. Uh, yeah. So, okay. I think Amitesh had asked me this question earlier, right when Maram was joining in, about mental health during the pandemic and things on those lines, and maybe you guys can also talk about your personal struggles as well. So I think like the pandemic definitely made it sort of I think it just pushed through the idea that mental health is significantly very important. And I think people started taking this more seriously during the pandemic. And it because it sort of, put people in that space, and, people were struggling. A lot of people, like, regardless of their identities, were struggling. Although like mental health is a bigger struggle for certain groups of people, definitely, but I think the pandemic sort of drove a lot of attention towards this space because a lot of investment has gone into mental health startups and mental health innovation during these last 2 years. What Yours Mindfully has been able to do, at least during this period, is to help make the kind of resources that people need accessible to them, specifically when it comes to narratives around mental health. So a lot of times, if you look up online, a lot of the resources that you get are specifically tailored for, say, the Western audience, or say for people who I think like traditionally privileged people in general, and a lot of times narratives of women, narratives of South Asian people, narratives of people from the LGBTQ plus community sort of get missed out in all of that. And I think the work that we do at Yours Mindfully is like also on the lines of shaping that narrative by bringing in people from these different identities to write about their experiences, and that sort of gets to people. And beyond that, we collaborated with psychologists to make mental health support accessible to young people from underprivileged backgrounds, specifically those who cannot afford a mental health treatment options. And I think and during the pandemic, like because everything really went virtual, like us being a virtual team was really a good thing because we already knew how to work around these virtual tools anyways. So that was one of those things that really helped us, create the kind of impact that probably maybe people who are used to, working on ground, maybe suddenly them switching to online kind of could not have made. So I think that's specifically where the work that we did has impacted that as well. Yeah, so maybe like connecting to this as well, like Mariam and Amitesh, how was your work transformed during the pandemic, and how have things changed, and what has it been like?
Okay, so I would say now that I'm looking back at it, it has been a positive change. However, throughout the pandemic, it was very difficult to handle. I think that the pandemic itself gave me the opportunity to notice the mistakes that have been happening in my life that were going on for so long without undiscovered. During the pandemic, the fact that we had to just suddenly stop everything between the beginning of the COVID pandemic up until the beginning of the online lectures and so on, there was a really long gap of nothing. And during that time, I got to discover myself a lot better, to discover so many different aspects of what life really is. And I think because during that time we were at an age where we were growing up, or it's a very vital age in our age group. It made a huge difference into who I am right now. And it also, as you said, it pointed the arrows towards mental health. So ever since then, I have been a lot more aware of my own mental health and of other people's mental health as well. A part of the organization that I co-started, GOOM organization, has a small part of it, a branch targeting mental health as well. And its idea is that without education, without mental health, education would not really get anywhere. In the past, during the COVID pandemic, there were lines where you could just talk to people, vent how you're feeling, and so on. And that has been a great experience personally.
Yeah, we should definitely collaborate on something in Sudan as well, and maybe like bring your work to our community in India and UAE. Like definitely something that we should really talk about beyond this call as well. Yeah, Amitesh, you can talk about your work during the pandemic.
Yeah, first of all, I would like to say that the collaboration sounds like a really good idea because it will lead to definitely a mixed perspective, like this new intermixing of perspectives, and we can learn a lot from each other's work. Regarding the pandemic itself, it was definitely a bit difficult to organize events which raised awareness on sustainability on an online medium, especially because different people have very different uh, degrees of internet connectivity. So it's difficult to expect everyone to be able to attend all online events. And even having all our classes on Zoom, every aspect of our life be on Zoom, it led to a lot of Zoom fatigue. So a lot of people would not show up to events, especially if they were not mandatory. But on the flip side, I would say that having having this access to Zoom also helped a lot. For example, as part of our university, we organized this student-run conference among universities in the UAE called the Higher Education Climate Dialogues. We started it in 2021 and we had another iteration in 2022 as well. And I would say that having it in the online medium was was so beneficial because if we had it in person, we might have been able to only target like universities in Abu Dhabi, suppose, if or at max we would be able to target like universities in the UAE and maybe a few in the GCC. But because we had it online on Zoom, because we reached out through social media and we allowed open access to everyone, we had attendees from several different countries, I think 13 different countries. Even we had attendees from Brazil and the United States as well, which are definitely like an entire day away when it comes to time zones. And just having things be on Zoom definitely did help in that regard. I would say it increased the reach, but at the same time also limited who was being reached out to because it definitely having access to an internet connection is definitely a privilege which we should recognize.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, while we sort of try to put the pandemic in a very positive light, it's like really important to understand that a lot of people have been cut out of the system, and like in the sense that we have a lot of privilege when it like compared to a lot of other people in regardless of all of the challenges that we've faced as well. Like, not to disregard our personal challenges, but like to also recognize that there are other people who are probably worse off and not able to access stuff because of this, and don't have the resources to access it even if they really want to. Yeah. So I mean, Mariam, you've got some pretty good fans out here as well. I can. So you work in education, so I'm really curious to know how you sort of bring in stuff like, say, I mean, you're a medical student, so how do you bring in that medical knowledge and like the STEM knowledge into like the other work that you do, and how does your work with other organizations sort of complement the work you do with education? Like, I'm really curious about that.
That is a great question. I think the first time I started to think that education is where we should start working was when I was realizing that the biggest problem we have in the medical field or the medical system isn't just about the hospitals and the money and all of that. It's also about the fact that the doctors themselves don't know how to bring or how to gain new information. Especially in like my country, the education system is still very old. We still use the whole using books, and people aren't as educated or aware to how they can attain information in so many different ways, as you said, from Zoom and like online resources and all of that. So I started thinking that if it's the best way for us to tackle this is to start working with education itself, to change the way people education, change the way people view education as a as a burden or as a just cramming for examinations and all of these things. During that same time, there was this I met a friend who thought of starting online lectures and so on. Although you guys had the whole online issue during the pandemic, we had it 2 years before, because or 1 year before, because there was a revolution in my country, and during the revolution everything was shut down, everything was closed off, and so we had a head start when it came to online education and so on. And then when the pandemic started, it was like we already had some of this already started and this initiative already like beginning. The pandemic did help like raise more awareness and help more people want to come and join and watch our lectures and our educational platform and so on. As you guys already said earlier, the problem with internet access was one of our biggest issues, because in Sudan, there's a lot of areas that have poor connection. There are times throughout the day where there's high traffic, so the internet starts cutting off and so on. So our first issue was that Zoom in itself is not practical here. It would work sometimes, but not all the time, because it requires a lot of internet. So we had this other friend who is a web developer. He helped us develop a website that has, or like it uses a lot less megabytes or a lot less internet than Zoom. And we started lectures there online. The lectures first started by us teaching, and then we got a lot of reach from a lot of teachers and doctors and students who wanted to help increase this. So we started increasing like the amount of people who were providing the help, and eventually it got to so many people around the country from different, right now it's about 6 or 7 states inside Sudan, and we deliver educational services to all of the universities in the country. It was really like inspirational when it came to how this like it tied up to what I'm passionate about. When I first went into medicine, I wasn't sure about going into medicine at all. What I knew I wanted to do was to be a teacher, but I also fell in love with medicine itself. So even now, I hope to like go into education as a major after medicine and try to go into the medical education fields and so on. So all of that kind of tied into what I'm doing. However, even through that, in a few here and there, I end up joining other initiatives or other organizations that are a bit different. That are talking about something that's not fully or directly education related. However, I have learned to understand that education is not just a book and a pen and a paper. You can educate people in literally every single thing, even people skills and networking and all of those other things that tie into the other organizations that I have been working with.
Yeah, I mean, definitely
I
like
hope
a
I'm
lot
not
of
talking too
takeaways.
fast. I tend to do that.
No, no, absolutely fine. I mean, learned a lot about your experiences in Sudan. Like, I mean, definitely an eye opener. Like because I wasn't aware of the revolution in Sudan. I mean, probably heard of it like in the news once in a while, but for you it's a ground reality. So like that's definitely very different. And so I mean, at least I mean, I like kudos to you for like sort of figuring out the role of education like much pretty early on, like in your activism space. Like at least for me, like the understanding that you have to go through schools has come much later, because that's something that yours mindfully is focusing on right now, to reach out to schools and educational institutions and create personalized resources for those specific communities. I mean, maybe if we had started off with education earlier, we would have been able to like maximize our impact better than we did. through, reaching out to individual young people. But I mean, obviously, everything's a learning curve. So, like, definitely okay. But the role of education becomes like really important, I think. And also, like, in terms of like in general, I think this is something that I keep introspecting on a lot. Like, my great grandfather was a farmer with like very little, formal education. He invested a lot of resources into educating my grandfather, who, went out to take up a government job. And then my grandfather put in, a lot of resources into educating my dad, who went on to become probably the first engineer in his family. And my parents have put in a lot of effort to, like, educate me. And I'm the first person from my family to get into like a top university in India. And I think I mean, beyond how cool it sounds, like it's also like how important education is in sort of raising your standard of living, or like unlocking more opportunities, especially when you come from like traditionally underrepresented backgrounds. It becomes like really important to have this kind of investment in education. Like, this is something that I keep thinking about and feeling very good about in general. So yeah, and I think, like, also like getting through the check as well. Like, I think all of us do recognize how important the like how important education has been in like giving us access to this platform, and getting us together as well. So yeah.
I definitely want to add that one of the eye-opening experiences for me was I lived about 2 years in Qatar. And when I went there, I went to an international school that made me feel like I noticed how different education there was being targeted in comparison to what public schools in Sudan look like, for example. How different and how free it was, how people's ideas were encouraged. And I noticed that this is nowhere near where education system is in the underdeveloped countries, where their main goal is just to give you enough to be able to get a higher education to begin with. So I noticed the huge difference and and I've been really privileged to be able to leave my country and see that and come back, and I'm trying right now to like add more or to spread this idea to among the youth in my country right now.
Amitesh, do you I
Yeah.
don't have anything to
I
add?
mean, I think Anaga will agree with me. Like, this is a very common problem in Indian high school educations as well. That they mostly prepare you for the exam, and if you go beyond, it prepares you for the entrance exams into higher education institutions. And it's only after coming into university that I've been exposed to this more like discussion based learning, essay based learning as well. I was when I first came across essay assignments, I was completely thrown thrown out of the loop, because like, from writing like fixed responses to like open ended essays, it seemed a big task. And even like discussion based learning, like, it was surprising for me when I first came into university, and it's like, oh, what are your opinions about this subject? So that was definitely a big eye opener.
And then you're like, oh, I'm allowed to have opinions now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think like all of the issues that all three of us are targeting, like be it mental health, sustainability, I think these things need to be a part of the educational system as well. And the reason that a lot of people are probably out of this is because this wasn't ever a part of the curriculum. Like, no one had to do all of this, or like access this in schools. So people sort of are like, okay, I'll get out of university, get a job, and that's sort of where people's goals largely end. And I think it's also something I spoke about like during my Global Student Prize application, about how educational, like, sort of transforming education is really a way to bring about massive change and getting young people seats at the table, decision-making spaces, is really important to sort of get this sort of change happening. Uh, I mean, your thoughts?
Actually, you reminded me of a question I wanted to ask. Um, I would say that at least one of the next Global Student Prize top 50 next year would be watching this live right now. So I want to know, what advices do you guys have for them for next year?
I think the simplest advice would be to just be you, like tell your story, and tell it the way like it is. Like you don't need to sound like anyone else, like any of the previous winners, to sort of get through. So because I literally remember reading every single one of those top 50 stories from last year, and I'm like, is this even remotely similar to me? Like I'm hunting for things in the stories which probably connect to me and make me feel that okay, maybe I have a chance, kind of thing. So it's I think at least like in terms of the student prize, it's about your story and how honestly you tell that story. That's probably gonna get you here. And I mean, because obviously each one of you, like as a student, there's definitely challenges you've overcome. There are definitely like things that you have done in your community. Like you don't need to have started an organization or like consulted with big companies to be a top 50 finalist, right? Like it's about like the small things that you have done, and maybe these aren't things that you have documented on social media. Maybe these aren't things that have come in like public media, newspaper articles or on the radio. Like that you like to be able to show that you have made an impact. You don't need to have all this publicity, right? So like don't sort of disqualify yourself just because you don't have newspaper articles written about you, or like you don't have a social media page that has like all your achievements in. So just, I mean, focus on telling your story. Focus on telling like, how what has impacted you has, how are you going to, how did you transform that into, how did you sort of like something that's impacted you? How did you take that? How did you overcome that? And how did you help other people overcome that? And I think that's definitely the key to getting here. Uh, yeah, feel free to add things.
Yeah, my advice is like among the same lines as Anaga. Uh, just be yourself, and it's mostly about how you represent what you did in your application. Because like each of us, as Anaga mentioned, you do not need to set up this fancy organization, or you do not need to have like super high contacts with government ambassadors and such. It's just these local changes you affect. Any even if it's among students of your school, if you do enough of it, if you're passionate about it, it will definitely reflect on your application. And I feel that this is the most important part, that you are passionate about what you do, that you aren't basically forced into doing something just because you think it will it will reflect on a college application or something. Being passionate about what you do is very important, because your passion the number one thing is that your passion will definitely reflect on how you write about your achievements and about your actions. So there's that. And obviously, like as Anaka mentioned again, be yourself. Like you do not need to sound like anyone else. uh, of course, like I do believe that all of us sound like an amalgamation of everyone we have met and everything we have read. But still, there's still a unique style with which each of us can have, even amidst that. So yeah, definitely, just find a thread you're passionate, find some topic you're passionate about, and put your energy behind it.
I would just like to add one more thing, that the number one step to actually winning is applying. So just apply. Even if you think you're not good enough, even if you think you're nowhere near the other people who have won it, still apply. And if you don't get it, apply the next year. There is nothing stopping you from trying to pursue your dreams or your goals.
And the application process is sort of, gives you a space to reflect on your journey so far. Like it got me thinking about things that I've done and, why I did the things I did and sort of helped me connect a lot of dots looking backwards. So, I mean, even if you don't end up in the top 50, it's still a rewarding experience. Like the process of writing that application is itself a rewarding experience. So like definitely try it out. And I really can't believe that it's been more than an hour since we've been on this call. Like I just feel like I mean, I feel like we just started or something. So I mean, it's just been incredible talking to you guys. And yeah, maybe we can, sort of wrap this up and, continue this on another conversation some other day. But maybe like, definitely a huge shout out to Tech.org and YK Foundation for the opportunity. I mean, Mariam just like, it's just Mariam and I having a conversation on LinkedIn, and we just reached out to a bunch of people at Tech, and, they're happy to, sort of let us go live and talk about, our behind the scenes experiences. Uh, uh, Also, like, Mariam, thanks for like reaching out and also following up, like also because I'm pretty bad at like responding to messages on time.
I definitely think the best thing or the best part about the Global Student Prize is the people we got to know through this. I'm so thankful for meeting each and every single one of those top 50. And hopefully next time we would have different people who are also with different stories and see what they have to say as well. I definitely think this is like a treasure that you can definitely, it's irreplaceable.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, a huge shout out to Check.org and the Waki Foundation once again for even giving us this platform where we can have our voice be heard. And definitely, as Mara mentioned, like the best part about this award is the community. Uh, like for example, when the results first came out and all of your profiles were there, I was so intimidated because all of so everyone has done such fantastic work. But then just getting to know the people behind the scenes, just even following each other on Instagram, commenting on each other's posts or something, it just shows that everyone is human. And definitely this has been such a supportive community, and I'm very grateful for this award. I'm very honored to share a platform with such inspirational change makers like you.
And we definitely need to have these conversations with more people. Like I don't think I've still connected with all 50 of these people. I'm still in the process of, reaching out and figuring things out. But a lot of people here, like you said, like just following each other on social media just makes you feel better that, you're not here by luck. Everyone's probably, like you, trying to build their own stories. Uh, yeah, so it was great talking to you, and let's catch up very soon. And also maybe talk about collaborations in, whatever organizational work that we do and, ideas that we have. Let's, now that we've got to know each other better, it's far easier to sort of get started.
Yes, and thank you for everyone in the audience who has stuck with us till now. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much, everyone.